During the Vietnam War, hundreds of American pilots were shot down over enemy territory. Most that survived were captured and taken prisoner. But few expected that their worst nightmares became their lived reality. One airman who managed to survive the unimaginably brutal nature of North Vietnam's Ho Lo prison recalled, "The pain was beyond anything I could have imagined. This hell of concrete and steel, sarcastically dubbed the Hanoi Hilton, became a house of horrors for the unlucky servicemen who within its walls were routinely tortured, starved, and mercilessly subjected to psychological warfare so severe it would make the Gestapo or NKVD squirm. For their captors didn't just want to extract military intelligence, they wanted to exact revenge. But what was this place that became infamous for being the source of so much pain? To better understand it and its victims, Hopland History takes you inside the walls of North Vietnam's most dreaded location. The Hanoi Hilton was already a symbol of pain and suffering long before the Americans joined the Vietnam War. In 1896, French conquerors established the Ho Lo prison. Here, they tortured dissidents and freedom fighters. Later, after partition, the North Vietnamese troops turned it into something much worse. The massive concrete walls kept heat in like an oven, and men roasted slowly, its cages made of rusty iron bars. Prisoners lived under the most terrible of conditions. Every surface was dirty. In packed cells, disease spread quickly. Men lost weight rapidly thanks to insufficient food. Cockroaches ran over people who were sleeping. Rats openly fought prisoners for their frustrate days in its dungeons. We were packed into dirty cells, and the smell of human feces was omnipresent. Rats ran over us at night, John McCain said. Being alone destroyed the spirit. Guards made sure that there was no talking between cells, and enforced that rule with violence. People in this hellhole were always terrified, never knowing what tomorrow's tortures would look like. Hearing the sound of keys jangling announced the start of indescribable agony. There was not even escape from the horror in their sleep, as nightmares assailed their subconscious. The North Vietnamese hated American pilots with a burning passion. Their bombing missions had killed thousands of civilians in Vietnam. Guards thought of them as air pirates that deserved the most brutal of punishments. To make things worse, their technical skills made them good targets for intelligence their captors relished in extracting through pain. Because they were officers, they were also good targets for war propaganda. Every pilot had to make a dreadful choice: fight back and suffer through anguish that is essentially impossible to imagine for one that hasn't gone through it, or follow the rules and live with terrible guilt and a broken spirit. In this pit of hell, even the bravest of men broke. It put one's inner strength to the ultimate test. For a lot of prisoners of war, Ho Lo was their own personal hell. However, the anguish behind those confines was not solely about survival. The North Vietnamese had a method to their cruelty, which went far beyond simple punishment. The North Vietnamese captors wanted to know things. Military intelligence successfully acquired gave them valuable information of American bombing doctrine that could save their countrymen's lives and infrastructure. Knowing the equipment, bombing routes, or types of ordnance deployed could and did give them an edge in this merciless war of attrition. Their propaganda was a large part of the battle. There were forced confessions seen on TV screens seen around the world. Their audience was a global one. They played the game of public opinion. Pictures were purposely set up to seem like their captors endured humane treatment. Statements made under duress by their captives criticized American imperialism. Every broken pilot became a tool for their political agenda. They said, "You are the criminals. You dropped bombs on our mothers and children." James Stockdale remembered saying, "You will pay." Orders came from the very top of the North Vietnamese command chain. Break their bones, break their spirits, make them turn against their country, make the strongest among them break. Being cruel became a tactic executed to appalling perfection. But what exactly did this cruelty look like? The torture methods utilized within the Hanoi Hilton were equal parts horrific and effective. Their trademark form of torture was the Vietnamese rope trick. Guards tied up POWs' arms behind their backs using rough ropes. Blood flow was choked off to their limbs in a matter of seconds. Their hands became large and purple. Shoulders popped out of place with sickening snaps. Men screamed until their voices gave out. Their cries echoed off the walls, further demoralizing those who were in earshot, waiting for their turn. They chained my arms behind my back till my shoulders came out of their sockets. John McCain subsequently said, "The pain was worse than anything I could have imagined. Damage to nerves soon became irreversible. The joints never healed right. Even simple activities like eating become hard or impossible. Writing letters home was painfully difficult. The physical damage caused by these brutal methods stayed with survivors for decades." Then there were savage beatings that came out of nowhere. Guards swung rubber hoses with great skill. Bamboo stick beatings left lasting marks on their naked, exposed skin. Fists smashed into faces, leaving nothing but fractured eye sockets. Boots broke ribs, sometimes puncturing lungs. Interrogators were experts at targeting injuries that were still fresh and still healing, causing incapacitating pain. "They hit me with a fan belt until I passed out," Jeremiah Denton said. "They started again when I woke up." North Vietnamese especially targeted broken bones. Infection could, and often did, get into open wounds. Prisoners of war had bruises piled on top of bruises. Their broken bodies never fully healed before the next painful session started. Then there was the quiz. The quiz progressively ruined the minds of the prisoners of war. Extreme lack of sleep made hours feel like days. Bright lights burned their retinas all the time. Questions were hurled at them in this weakened state, over and over. The line between reality and hallucination became blurred for the men who managed to live through these merciless interrogations. Airman Sam Johnson said, "They would keep you awake for days, asking the same questions over and over, until you didn't know what was real anymore." Threats were aimed at psychological weak spots of the mind. Guards often threatened to kill those they interrogated. The idea of unexpected death took a terrible psychological toll, day after day. Often, other POWs were spared if a POW cooperated. Working together with the enemy was good for their comrades. Resistance meant severe punishment for everyone. Then there was the infamous meat hook. The meat hook held men in indescribable agony. Their bodies hung from wrists that were tied behind their backs. The hours felt like they lasted forever. Shoulders progressively separated from their joints, minute by horrible minute. The body weight of the POWs was what pulled their own joints apart, inch by agonizing inch. They tied my wrists together behind my back. Everett Alvarez Jr. said, "I thought my arms would rip off." Then there was the water torture. This method took advantage of the body's most basic phobias. Guards poured water down the throats of POWs that was too much for them to breathe. Their lungs soon felt like they were on fire. It almost always felt like death was certain. The procedure was pressed home until even the toughest of POWs broke. They always broke. "They made me drink water until I thought I would drown," said one unidentified prisoner. Then there was the isolation. Being alone in a cell ruined social beings. The small cells were only 6 feet long. Darkness was often their only companion. There was no physical touch from any other human being besides the beatings and the torture. Weeks turned into months. Their fragile minds shattered under the weight of their suffering. The quiet was too much. Pilot James Stockdale said, "I would talk to the ants just to hear a voice." North Vietnam guards were experts at deploying starvation tactics, which all but ensured the prisoners of war's resistance weakened over time. The food bowls of their victims usually contained soup that was watery. Then the amount of rice they received was perceptibly decreased day after day. Prisoners of war bodies started consuming themselves from the inside. Muscles became weaker, then disappeared altogether. Then their minds were next, as their cognitive faculties began to fail them. Making decisions soon became exceptionally difficult, then impossible. Medical neglect made sure that their pain never went away. Infections got worse, and once gangrene, they weren't treated. Bones that were broken healed crookedly. Fever in these minuscule cells often raged without control. But the pain was always there, lurking, never far away. They didn't give us food, medicine, and made us sign lies on film, McCain said. It was all about breaking us. Torture went beyond just acquiring information. Guards also destroyed POWs for their own pleasure and revenge. Humiliation and pain were a game to them. Power made these soldiers drunk. Sometimes they tortured us just because they could. It wasn't about the facts, it was about revenge, Bud Day said with a frown. Bombing raids by the United States led to quick responses. Guards attacked the torture and the POWs with even more rage. After each B-52 carpet bombing sortie, POWs were all punished collectively. The infamous March of Shame was aimed at portraying to the world that America was weak. Pilots who were hurt were marched through streets that were openly hostile. People in the crowd made fun of broken bodies. These propaganda marches turned terrible private pain into a public spectacle. Psychological warfare became even more brutal, reaching its terrible apogee during the height of Rolling Thunder. Men were petrified from fake executions. Guards wantonly held firearms to prisoners' heads. Triggers clicked when there were no bullets in the chambers. The fear evinced by the POWs was answered by their captives' cruel laughter. Threats were even aimed at American families far away. Guards told their prisoners just what they were going to do to their wives and children. Pictures of loved ones became psychological weapons. Forced betrayals broke the confidence between comrades. Guards made friends fight each other. Cellmates could become informants. The savagery eventually had no military aim. Pain became a goal in and of itself. Their revenge seemed to satiate deeper cravings than information ever could. Over time, the distinction between intelligence extraction and open sadism became blurred, then non-existent. For many guards, causing pain became the objective. When freedom eventually came, it didn't fully heal these men. Their bodies came back, but with irreparable harm. Shoulders never got back their full range of motion. Their backs hurt all the time. Hands shook uncontrollably. Legs remembered being in chains. Pain stayed with them for the rest of their lives. Their minds had even deeper wounds. Debilitating nightmares of their time in the Hanoi Hilton came back to haunt their sleep years later. Sounds that came out of the depths of their subconscious made these POWs panic, just like in captivity. It was impossible for many of them to be in crowded rooms. Their relationships deteriorated and then died, slow, silent deaths. "I left Hanoi with scars that you can't see," James Stockdale admitted. The real wounds were inside. Even worse, many of these POWs were haunted by severe survivor's guilt. Why them and not me? Was the terrible question that haunted their souls as severely as their captive sadism. Why did I make it? Did I fight hard enough? Could I have done more? There were no satisfying answers to the questions, and that made it worse. Many prisoners, though, were barely able to get through these darkest of times with their own code of conduct, developed within the confines of the Hanoi Hilton. Prisoners sent messages through walls and other barriers. They built complex mechanisms for talking to each other. They maintained military discipline inside themselves. Small acts of defiance helped them keep some dignity. Faith also kept spirits up. Humor was rare but was a big help. Their stories changed how Americans thought about the Vietnam War. The public also eventually had to face the brutal realities. From these experiences, military training evolved a lot over time. Because of these experiences, the interrogation resistance training for POWs for subsequent generations of servicemen improved dramatically. A lot of survivors turned their trauma into purpose. They entered public service. They spoke up for veterans. They told their stories even though it cost them a lot. Their strength has also inspired several generations. People eventually recognized their sacrifice. Their scars showed that people can be both harsh and brave, but often able to persevere, stronger after surviving their ordeal. However, even after the Hanoi Hilton's gates were ultimately opened, the misery continued. The full cost of incarceration would follow these men throughout their lives. What occurred in the Hanoi Hilton was war at its basest, at its most cruel. But it also became a testament to how strong and resilient the spirit can be. These individuals went through indescribable pain, but they often came back with their spirits unbowed. Even though their bodies and their minds often would never completely heal, their pain and courage remains perhaps history's greatest example of just how much a warrior can endure and come out the other side. At Hoplon History, we do not forget, we remember. If you like this sort of content and want to see more, please like and subscribe.